Top crime cases from the dark web. Known as the dark web, this section of the internet is only accessible using Tor, a unique browser. Because dark web sites do not show up in search results, you must have the website's precise URL handy if you wish to view it. This is internet's potentially dangerous component. If you have ever wondered where illicit narcotics are sold or hitmen are hired, you have come to the right place. While the dark web does have its share of risks, it also has a variety of interesting things outside only illicit markets. Journalists and whistleblowers may use the dark web to communicate without fear of retribution. Even people in nations with strong internet prohibitions may communicate freely on the dark web. The dark web is the perfect place for crime, as we are going to show you. Drugs. When German police took down the dark web marketplace, Dark Market, they did more than take down the greatest underground internet drug bazaar at the time. In fact, they seized over 20 servers in Moldova and Ukraine, which included a wealth of information on the site's customers and dealers. This operation, with over 150 arrests in 8 countries, 230 kilograms of narcotics, and $31.6 million in cash and cryptocurrencies confiscated, and an apparent change in police enforcement approach that places more emphasis on dark web suppliers as opposed to the sites themselves. Operation Dark Hunter is not the first multinational operation of this kind. The name is a play on Tor, the anonymity browser that allows access to the dark web. Operation Disruptor from the previous year resulted in a comparable number of arrests and twice as many drug seizures. Dark Market is not the only marketplace on the dark web whose servers have been seized. In 2018, the Dutch police controlled the Hansa site for over a month themselves to flush out dealers and customers. Prosecutors say that Hyun G. Martin and her co-conspirators shipped 1,600 parcels with fictitious identities across the United States. Jonathan Patrick Turrentine racked up almost 1,000 good ratings on Empire, one of the marketplaces through which he sold a variety of narcotics, as well as stolen email addresses and passwords. According to court filings, Albie Pagan earned over $1 million on Wall Street market alone, and that is only 3 of the 65 arrests made in the United States. The remaining claimed occupants of the dark web were dispersed around Australia, Bulgaria, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. However, it remains uncertain if even 150 arrests would be sufficient to slow down the situation. Before the epidemic, the dark web drug trade was already a multi-billion-dollar business, according to experts. The demand has not diminished, and supply will attempt to at least match it. Stolen information. Since 2018, the quantity of stolen usernames and passwords in circulation has surged by 300%, as determined by the Digital Shadows Photon research team after 18 months of auditing criminal forums and markets on the dark web. More than 15 billion of these compromised credentials from 100,000 data breaches are now accessible to cybercriminals. Approximately 5 billion of these are unique, with no repeated credential pairings. The research cautions that cybercrime marketplaces include a treasure trove of account data. The 15 billion compromised login credentials include usernames and passwords for online banking, social networking, and music streaming sites. That is the equivalent of 2 account logins for each man, woman, and child on Earth. Although there is an aspect of commercial selling of stolen logins to aid the illegal account takeover market, the researchers at Digital Shadows discovered that much account information was freely distributed. Although the average price of commercially sold logins was $15, more valuable credentials, such as logins to current bank accounts, demanded a premium. The average price for online banking and other financial services accounts was $70. Depending on the cash available and the freshness of the credential theft, Digital Shadows saw certain bank account credentials being sold for as much as $500. Peter Scully. There are monsters in dark places, and in the darkest reaches of the internet, Peter Scully lurked. In 2015, the Australian paedophile was arrested in the Philippines, accused with manufacturing and distributing online child abuse movies. Some claimed that Scully's offenses were so heinous that he should be executed. A Filipino jail will be his permanent home instead. Peter Scully had a normal existence that gave no indication of his underlying depravity. Scully was married with 2 children and resided in the Melbourne suburb of Nar Warren with his family. In Melbourne, Scully embraced a criminal lifestyle. He devised a property fraud that duped about $2.68 million from 20 investors. He had a Malaysian teenage girlfriend named Ling, whom he pimped out at suburban sex parties. In 2009, Scully became the subject of an inquiry by the Australian Securities and Investments Commission. As a result, he fled the country 2 years later to Cagayan de Oro on the island of Mindanao in the Philippines. There he began building his twisted empire. Peter Scully created a worldwide pedophile network based on footage of children being sexually abused and tormented in the Philippines. Through his production firm, No Limits Fun, he would live stream them for paying customers on the dark web. In the Philippines, Scully preyed upon the helpless and weak. He recruited young victims by luring their destitute parents with the promise of food and school. 2 Filipina accomplices, Carm Ann Alvarez and Lazel Margalo, assisted him in recruiting victims. Both women were also taking part in Scully's horrifying videos. Scully produced horrifying material, including films of rape and torture involving infants as young as 18 months. According to reports, the depravity shown in the film named Daisy's Destruction was so horrible that many investigators considered it to be a fabrication. It was not. Scully murdered an 11-year-old girl and hid her corpse under his residence. But most troubling was the fact that Scully had a large client base, with internet users paying up to $10,000 each watch. Meanwhile, 22-year-old Matthew David Graham, also known as Lux, an Australian paedophile, was attracted to Scully's violent movies. Lux managed one of the most renowned sites on the dark web, Hurt to the Core. Here, tens of thousands of individuals exchanged material depicting child abuse, the majority of which featured young children. This material is known as hurtcore, a subgenre of pornography that depicts real agony and anguish. Lux posted one of Peter Scully's most infamous films on his website, increasing the video's popularity. By February 2015, when Peter Scully was captured, Lux had also been apprehended. A court sentenced Lux to 15 years in jail after describing his conduct as pure evil. Scully claimed to be remorseful, but his actions barely supported this claim. By entering a not guilty plea, Scully compelled at least 10 of his victims to testify and relive their horrific ordeals. He also likely continued to manage his dark web enterprise, making phone calls and messages with his collaborator Margalo until her arrest. In June 2018, Scully was sentenced to life in jail, yet the Philippines and the dark web continues to be a hotspot for child abuse and exploitation. Murder for hire. Although most assassins for hire are scams that are paid in Bitcoin, this case is the first dark web case that has been proven. Lieutenant Colonel Yevgenia Shishkina, a Russian police investigator, was shot and killed outside her residence outside Moscow in 2018. A few months later, authorities detained 2 St. Petersburg residents in connection with the murder. Abdulaziz Abdulazizov, a 19-year-old medical student, and a 17-year-old young male. Police determined through their investigation that the 2 suspects were recruited to carry out the murder of the high-ranking official and were paid $16,000 for the assassination. The individual accused of employing the 2 killers goes under the alias Miguel Morales. He was the subject of Lieutenant Colonel Shishkina's investigation, and he authorized the hit. According to the authorities, Miguel Morales is the administrator of a drug-dealing website on the dark web called Hydra, which is where the order to murder was issued. Hydra is Russia's biggest dark web drug trafficking network, comprising of hundreds of separate websites. In August of 2018, the 17-year-old, the younger of the two suspects, put a job listing on the Hydra platform. A few weeks later, he got a response in the form of a request for his private messaging address. Soon after, the specifics of the contract killing were negotiated. Abdulazizov was responsible for the actual killing. Using a car-sharing service, he traveled from St. Petersburg to Moscow, where he collected a weapon and ammo from a drop box put in a forested suburb of Moscow. He then booked a hotel room close to Lieutenant Colonel Shishkina's house. There he awaited more orders. Using Telegram, the 17-year-old then provided Abdulazizov the name and whereabouts of Lieutenant Colonel Shishkina. Abdulazizov studied YouTube videos to learn how to load the rifle during his leisure. On the morning of the murder at 6:30 a.m., Abdulazizov told investigators that he raced around the back of Lieutenant Colonel Shishkina's residence, rapidly approached the officer from behind, and fired 2 shots at close range. She died shortly afterwards. It was said that she died in the arms of her spouse. On March 12, 2019, Abdulazizov and his teenage accomplice were apprehended. This is one of just a handful recorded instances of internet murder for hire. The concern is, though, how many incidents stay undiscovered. The Tor network is both advantageous and harmful. Due of its numerous benefits, the US government does not want to shut it down. Even if they did, it would be difficult to completely shut it down and would need the participation and collaboration of dozens of governments worldwide. The dark web is not all negative. The dark web is a source of information and knowledge. There are several resources accessible without restriction. The dark web is more resistant to government and corporate monitoring. Whistleblowers, journalists, and other professionals at risk of targeted monitoring share sensitive material over the dark web. Human Rights Watch and the Electronic Frontier Foundation, among others, encourage the use of and access to the dark web. Use the dark web with caution. Thanks for watching Bad Things. Hit the subscribe button, like button, and notification bell, and share our channel for our up-and-coming true crime videos.